And now, it's 10 a.m.
Let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Trucking, got my chips cashed in, keep trucking, like the Dog Man, together, more or less in line, just keep trucking on.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Interesting armpits talking about Woj.
He's got the Woj tweet up. He's been corrected. He's also wearing a T-shirt today.
He has a complicated relationship with the mouse. Again, Ben and I have never listened to a word of this guy's show.
Yeah.
It just always is on in the background.
It starts when our show starts. It ends when our show ends. So it's on TV just because we have ESPN turned on. But, yeah, there's obviously we can't have the volume up.
We noticed when he has Shams on instead of Woj.
Yeah.
And now he's putting up the Woj tweet. I wonder who he ticked off over there with the mouse now that he has to, apologize for.
He has a real funny thing where, look, a lot of people have broken away from ESPN and had a ton of success. Dan Patrick, obviously, Keith Olbermann. Who was the guy who did the late night show for a while? Craig Ferguson? He did Kilborn. Kilborn did that, and then he did the
Daily Show,
and then he went over to doing that. But there have been people, obviously, who have left ESPN and had a ton of success. So it's not like he's the first, but his unwillingness to ever fully buy into ESPN is a funny leverage play. And it's going to work for him. I mean, he's very good at this.
And it plays out very visually.
But he is good at making everyone know that he is not a brown noser for ESPN.
And by the way, this all started with my complaint that he would not put on a shirt.
Yeah.
That he had to be tank top.
Yeah.
He had to have his armpit on TV every day. And I speculated, Ben, that there is sitting in some office somewhere, some TV exec that is just dying. Get this armpit
We're going to need
off
you
of my
to put
TV.
a T-shirt on. Yeah.
And he refused. And then there was this big conflict. What was it even over?
You know what? Oh, I can't remember.
There was this big conflict where the now fired exec at ESPN.
I just think he didn't love Pat McAfee.
But McAfee called him out by name on his show. What was that guy's name? It's a name you'd recognize if you follow sports media at all.
Norby.
Norby, yeah.
Yeah.
And he called him out by name on his show. And the next thing you know, there had to be some reconciliation, and Armpit wore a shirt for 6 months. Now Norby's gone. And the day after Norby got fired, what happened, Ben?
Pitts
out! And now he's been going back and forth.
The shirt is a harbinger for his relationship with ESPN.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
When things are bad, Pitts out.
When he's making a statement.
This is quite literally and figuratively a muscle flex.
Listen, I've been around this business and was with Gordon Monson for way too, the things that executives latch onto, and and Gordon and how he dressed at remotes was one of those things.
Yep.
That it gets almost obsessive. And there's got to be one of those execs who are obsessing over that armpit.
Oh, I wouldn't
There's
be surprised,
no way
honestly,
it isn't happening.
If in a meeting somewhere, Pat McAfee had agreed, okay, I'm never going to wear the tank top again. On a Friday meeting. Yeah. And then Monday showed up.
All right, Norby.
Monday showed up in a tank top. Oh, you thought?
There will be a book written about
the tank top.
This period at ESPN. And they'll be there was this random petty feud about whether or not he was going to wear a T-shirt or wear a tank top. You know it.
Absolutely.
And by the way, my original point is that, you know what? At some point, your own accomplishment is more than a gimmick. You know, your gimmick was, well, tough guy punter because there's no such thing as a tough guy punter, but I'm that where, I'm going to do the wrestling and I'm ripped and I've got the tank top and that was my gimmick. Well, you've made it, buddy.
Yeah, you're fine.
You've made it.
In fact, you've probably made more money I'm guarantee you made more money than you ever did playing football.
Yeah, it's all right. You can throw on a shirt. I'm sure you're cold.
Yeah, right.
It's a TV studio. Those things are ice boxes.
I don't even think tank tops are that comfortable. Maybe I'm off on that. I'll wear them occasionally.
They're certainly not flattering.
But they're not flattering. That's why I don't wear flip-flops.
But like my ultimate example always is Rafa Nadal.
Yeah.
Like at some point he's like, you know what? My tennis speaks for itself. I can get rid of the capris. They're super uncomfortable. They're kind of hot. In fact, I think I'm a worse player because I wear them.
Ricky Fowler. He stopped going with the monochrome outfits.
Yeah.
Right? At some point he was like, I don't need to wear bright orange every weekend like I'm hunting in these whole 9. I can just wear normal human clothes. He'll occasionally still have bright colors, but he doesn't need to do the monochrome thing every time.
And here, I'll salvage a sports conversation out of this. Like, because I understand gimmicks, you've got to get it off the ground somehow. When Rafa was grabbing notoriety and his play was just coming up and he was a late teenager and all this stuff and he was this dominant clay player, he needed something to get him sponsorship deals and I'm going to wear these capris. But at some point, you've made it. Now, like a sports conversation, I'd say this about think of gimmicks in football. I'll say this about the air raid offense. Yeah, you need to get Texas Tech off the mat or you need to get Washington State off the mat. Well, yeah, get a gimmick. But at some point, the gimmick is either going to peter out or you have to get rid of the gimmick.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Washington State always had a ceiling. Texas Tech always had a ceiling. Did Leach ever win the conference at Texas Tech? I don't think he did. Maybe the Graham Harrell year. I'd have to look back and see. But even that year, I don't think he did.
But back to your point. Once you become USC and your play speaks for itself, you don't go to the gimmick.
You don't need the gimmick. Yeah, no. Ben, Rafa didn't throw the capris on when he was 35. He's not putting them on now.
Who's the top radio host right now? Like sports radio host in the world?
In the world?
Like
it might be Armpit. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
Okay. I don't look at podcast numbers or
we'll
whatever.
get rid of Armpit. We'll go to Cowherd or
Okay.
Patrick or whatever, whoever you want to say is in there. Like they don't start throwing on muscle shirts now. They don't start wearing the tank tops now to be like, well, it works for him. That's his gimmick. That's going to work. I need to steal that gimmick and have it work for me.
Yeah, right.
They don't need to draw attention to themselves by wearing tank tops to stand out the way USC has put on the proverbial tank top to try and run this type of offense that they don't need to run.
Man, there's a lot of metaphors flying, but I think people understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do find it hilarious that we're watching this interplay at ESPN play out with no sound. And just because it happens to be on in the studio. Shams is on! Shams is on with Armpit right now.
You know how good his show is that we're doing play-by-play of it? His show is so good.
Okay.
We're doing a Pat McAfee play-by-play.
There is no way it's good. Like, not a chance. There's not a chance that it's good. But whatever, it gets a ton of downloads or whatever the kids are doing these days.
People love it, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. All right, Ben, where do you want to start? You want to start with trade rumors today?
Sure. We can talk about, just general NBA news. A lot going on yesterday, a lot going on today.
Zach LaVine, what do you think? The Jazz are rumored to be one of a couple of teams that are interested in him.
So I think it's important to remember that midway through the season last year, Zach LaVine had switched from being hey, we're going to shop this guy around, see what interesting packages there are, to Zach LaVine has negative trade value, and if you're going to unload him, you're going to have to attach assets with him. And look, the Jazz have positioned themselves to be a team that can take on your bad assets and bad players with additional assets and benefit from that. So I actually think in that sense, it does make some sense. However, Zach LaVine does have like 3 years and close to $150 million left on his deal.
Well, he has 2 and a player option, right? Which he'd be a crazy person to decline.
Unless he plays awesome for the next 2 years.
We could make him miserable.
Sure. Yeah, you could run him out of town. Or he comes back and you give him a green light and he plays awesome and he opts out. And I want to revisit that point because it applies to somebody else. But you're going to need multiple future first-round draft picks or good young players, and Chicago has not been run very well for a while now, and so they don't have a lot of good young players. They've got a couple, but they don't have a lot of good young players. Like, they don't have the obvious piece, in my opinion, that you attach to Zach LaVine, and it's not just this year's 11th pick, because this draft is just not that awesome.
I don't think it'd be a player, though. I think it'd be picks.
Yeah, so you would need like this year's 11th pick, and then probably another unprotected pick in the future at least, and then maybe like one of their young guards or something like that. That's just so much money to take on. It really hamstrings your flexibility as a team in the Jazz sense to add $50 million to your salary cap. So I think that gets difficult. You need more assets with it. So I don't see a Jordan Clarkson and John Collins for Zach LaVine straight up, even though the numbers work.
Oh no, I don't think so either. No, he's a net negative asset, no doubt. So they'd have to attach something. I just was kind of baking that in, honestly.
Yeah, I think some people
like the Jazz are not going to invest in Zach LaVine.
No, I don't think so.
That's not going to be a thing.
No, I think you hope that accidentally he turns into prime Zach LaVine, which a couple of years ago he was 27 points a game. He was pretty good. I mean, Zach LaVine is a very talented player. He's hurt a lot. He's very small. I shared a story on Twitter yesterday of the first time I saw Zach LaVine. I covered the 2014 NBA draft, and I was nervous because I'd never done it before. And the day before the draft, you have media day, and you just go wait in a big hotel, just kind of like in the lobby, and then they open a ballroom, and you walk into the ballroom, and you interview the players. I didn't know what I was doing, so I just found the person who looked most like me, just like a skinny kid with bad clothes on, and followed them around because he was moving more confidently than I was. And ballroom doors open, and he walked, and he walked, and he walked, and I kept following him, thinking, like, why is he not going to talk to the players? And he turned around, and it was Zach LaVine. Like, the point of the story being, he's so small that I thought he was a medium member when he came into the league. And while he's certainly bigger than that now, he's not huge. The point being, now that he's 30 and he's been in the NBA for 10 years, the wear on his body is going to be more significant for a player with his size than it would be a LeBron James. So he might actually be closer to the end of his career because of his freakish athleticism and relatively small frame. So if you're taking on that type of money for a guy, you're probably not getting Lauri Markkanen at 26 years old where he's just about to start his upswing.
So I certainly have further thoughts on Zach LaVine. I'll share them in a minute. But probably the main reason that I pass if I'm the Jazz, like right without even watching any film or talking to anybody. You know who his agent is? Christian, get it ready.
Hello.
You don't want him.
He's a clutch guy.
That'd be 3 clutch guys on. I guess only 2 because you swap Jordan.
Hot dog's out.
Oh, hot dog's out. Yeah, Jordan's not a clutch guy. JC is not a clutch guy,
I don't
right?
think so, no. Colin Sexton is.
Sexton is. Yeah, you're right. It's just Sexton and Talon. So you'd be back. You'd double your clutch people in Utah.
Yeah, no thanks. No, I'm only kind of kidding. I really just wanted to hear the hello drop, honestly. But from what I could tell, Ben, it's a priority in the front office over there is, and have you ever met somebody that ever did this? The people that can trade from like a paperclip to a Ferrari.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, how far can I make this small asset go by, trading something to someone for something else? But it seems like the Jazz are kind of calculating things in that. Like, is this worth more than we're going to spend? Like, honestly, for the people out there who are worried about Zach LaVine making the Jazz good, for the tank people out there, he hasn't helped Chicago win any.
Yeah, right.
He barely plays.
Right.
So who cares?
Right.
But can you bring him in and flip him for something more valuable later? Maybe he becomes a better player than everybody thought because he was being used differently in Chicago. Maybe that's the route they go, where we don't have to spend anything on this guy, and we still think he has gas in the tank to win games, and we kind of want to win games.
And he's had a run of moron coaches, and, when, again, he's a 2-time All-Star.
And so if we're going to talk about him being a serviceable person on the court, one, health is he never plays.
Right.
So that's the most important thing. But two, if I really wanted to get value out of him, not just build him up to trade him, Because if I build him up to trade him, I let him take over my team next year and then move him at the deadline. But if I actually want to see if he's going to be a contributing member or make him a better player, I would try and Colin Sexton him. Get him to shift his mentality.
Yeah.
You're not going anywhere as the lone guard who's going to get on my back, fellas. We're going to the promised land. So if you can adjust his mentality and get rid of that idea of 27 points and say, you know what we need out of you, Zach? We need 25 and 5. Because I want a guard who can rebound a little bit. You move it around.
Yeah.
You play within the system. You uplift others. Then, all right. Now, that's a contributing member of this ball club. And most importantly, you remember that Lowry is the best player on the team. And if you can do that, you can be a helpful member of the Utah Jazz. But if you can't, well, Lowry's going to sit out the first half of the year, and you go score 27. But either way, the idea is you keep –
Yeah.
If you're not investing anything in it,
Sure.
then what difference does it make? Maybe you can flip it for a Ferrari down the road. Who cares? And I don't think Zach LaVine, like John Collins didn't really turn out. John Collins turned out to be good, but my whole theory going into it was that John Collins makes you better, and that means it's a sign that they want to win games. Nah, John Collins wasn't really that.
No, he hasn't made the Jazz better.
He was good, but he wasn't a difference maker. I might throw Zach LaVine in that category.
Mm-hmm. They're replacement level players. Even though their numbers are big, they don't really change the outcome of your season one way or another.
Because who cares? You got to pay somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, get over the numbers. The length is the concerning part with Zach LaVine.
Yes, absolutely. 3 years, $150 million is a lot.
The 3 years, though, part
Yeah.
is the hard one. Because he's not getting any younger. He's not getting any healthier. And you're going to have him around for a while. I mean, his trade value right now is we have to pay to move off you.
Yeah.
And so if you take him on with the idea that you're going to trade him down the line, well, you got to make him more valuable in some way, shape, or form.
Revisiting something I bookmarked earlier, and also where this contract length comes into play, is John Collins technically has 2 years left on his deal. His second year after this year is a player option. It's at $25 million. I would bet you that's not as cemented in that he's picking that up as I think a lot of people would think.
The market might be going up.
The market might be going up. He's still relatively young. And while I don't think he's going to get $25 million a year, he might, if let's say he has a good season with the Jazz this season, he could capitalize off that by opting out and getting maybe he gets 3 years and $65 million, and that's more money than he's going to get by opting into his deal for a year and then trying to replicate that a year from now. So I would probably lean towards him opting in at this point. 2 years from now, but I don't think it's...
Well, Zach LaVine's opted in. Yeah,
I think Zach LaVine's opting in.
I mean, because he's not going to get anywhere near that. Unless he truly turns it around over the next 3 years, he's never going to get anywhere near that.
And I still don't know if someone's giving him $50 million a year on average, which the final year of his deal is $49 million.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's picking that up. So you're trading for 3. That's a long time. But they can afford it.
Yeah, Jazz can afford it.
But don't look at this as and I'm going to put a stop to this even before the trade happens, if it ever happens. Spare me this is some big game hunting.
Yeah.
Some big game hunting, Danny. This is not that. That's not what he was talking about.
No, I agree with you.
This is not in that category.
Danny wouldn't think this is big game hunting.
I don't think current Zach LaVine really makes you any better. Am I being too hard?
No, he hasn't made Chicago better. They are consistently a play-in tournament team, even when he's been healthy. And they were this year when he wasn't healthy.
Yeah, and they have other decent players too, and they still managed to underachieve.
I mean,
horribly constructed roster, to your point of the Bulls being run poorly. But
again, the nice spot for the Jazz is, A, it doesn't really seem like there's a market for Zach LaVine. So if you really wanted to be the only market for him, you can set your price. And if Chicago doesn't want to match it, then you just say, fine. We don't need him.
Oh, yeah, that's not a loss. This isn't something that... No, this is Chicago calling everybody and saying, we got to get off this guy.
And the Jazz saying, conceivably, because...
We could help you out.
Sacramento's not going to do it. They have been mentioned as a possibility, but I don't see that happening.
See, there's a team that thinks Zach LaVine will make them better, and he won't.
Philadelphia just needs bodies and has space, but The reports out of Philly yesterday were that no, there's no interest there, even though that was part of this initial report, which I think is important, that already there's people disputing that this is accurate at all.
You mean they tried somebody pairing with Joel Embiid that dribbled the whole game and it didn't work out? Is that what you're telling me?
Weird. And then third, just like, yeah, if the Jazz are the only team out there, there's no rush to get a deal done. Danny Ainge could sit on this for a year and a half if he wants to. You know, you could let this thing bake.
No, but to play into our previous joke, this is not Danny Ainge hauling Justin into his office and going, "You, Zanuck, get me Zach LaVine."
Right.
This is not.
No, you could have Zach LaVine yesterday. You could have had him at the trade deadline.
Right.
This option has been there. And you know what? The players the Jazz would have to move to get him are not so hard to have on your roster that you have to make a deal.
At all.
Fine. Bring John Collins and Jordan Clarkson back next year. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, they like Utah.
Yeah, they're fine.
Yeah, Jordan's a fan favorite. John Collins actually played okay the last 15 games of the season. See if there's something there that having a second season in Utah allows him to play better. They're just not. There's no urgency to get something like this done.
Well, they figured out what John Collins' role was.
Yeah. Right.
And this sounds harsh, but he's kind of a backup big. He's a Draymond Green-like big that gives you a ton of flexibility in your lineup. But you probably can't play that lineup for 35 minutes a game.
No. Now, the strange thing is the league might slowly be evolving to more John Collinses at the 5, especially if he continues to shoot well, like not traditional 7-footers. That, you know.
That's what Porzingis gave Boston.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, and John Collins
or Al
Kristaps
Horford
Porzingis,
gave
but
Boston before that. I mean, I don't want to sell him short.
But you continue to kind of mold into this role. And you know what? If he can be valuable at that, he could have more value in a trade, too, down the line. Again, to this point of, I'm not so sold that John Collins is a sunk cost that I think some people think he is, because the league is really quickly moving towards a lot of John Collinses.
Yeah, I don't think he's a sunk cost. I don't think he's a less valuable asset than he was when the Jazz traded for him.
And it's also important to remember what the Jazz traded for him.
Nothing.
Rudy Gay and a second-round pick that's never going to convey. It's like, so you need to get more value than Rudy Gay and a second-round pick that will never convey back if you want to quote-unquote win.
And in that, by the way, the Jazz kind of had to get off Rudy Gay.
Yeah, I had to. Yeah.
You know, so it was wonderful.
Absolutely. No, that was actually some negative value that the Jazz needed to unload.
Derek Favors turned into that.
Mm-hmm. But to that point, Derek Favors is a good example here. If you had to attach a first to get rid of Derek Favors' money, which was a lot less than Zach LaVine, you've got to gauge that with the market. If you're trying to unload Zach LaVine to Utah, you've got to attach stuff to it the same way the Jazz had to attach first-round picks to get off Derek Favors.
I think they agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to make this deal because, next up, conference finals.
Yeah.
Here we come. Zach LaVine.
Yep.
Taped together, 29-year-old Zach LaVine. All right. Top 3 stories of the day, KSLSports.com. Coming up next, Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top 3 stories of the day on KSLSports.com. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben join the KSL Sports Zone for Hanson Scotty's Day of Adoption in partnership with the Humane Society of Utah and Hercules Credit Union. Just $12.80 adoption fees all day on June 25th. Plus, the Zone will be live at the Humane Society of Utah in Murray from 10 to 3. Bring home a furry friend on Hanson Scotty's Day of Adoption. Hanson Scotty get the whole event named after him, and you and I are relegated to being lumped into their time slot.
The Jake Scott, I would call it the 975. The Jake Scott 975. Adopt 9 cats, 7 dogs, 5 whatever else you want to take home for 975.
No.
So you end up with, top of my head, 21 animals.
Go from 0 to 21.
It's a bag of dogs. I took a bag of dogs home.
Hey, real quick, we have some evidence in our armpit McAfee discussion quick, and then we'll jump into top 3 stories. If you missed the first segment, I'm sorry, we don't have time to catch you up. But Jimmy said, have you two seen the skit where Peyton and Eli are looking for a third member of the Manning cast? We have not. McAfee is auditioning, And Peyton is taping magazines on his arms and saying, let's get some sleeves on you, big boy.
We got to get that drop.
We got to find that.
We got to get that drop.
Yes. Thank you, Jimmy.
Christian, your weekend is booked until you find. We got to get some sleeves on that big boy drop.
Appreciate that. Go Lions. All right, time for the top 3 stories of the day. KSLSports.com, brought to you by J. Brooks Jewelers. 2 locations to serve you, one on Winchester Street across from Fashion Place Mall, the other at Traverse Mountain in Lehigh. All right, Christian, let's get started.
Number 1, the Lakers have hired JJ Reddick to be their head coach, and I've actually got leaked audio from the first practice.
Oh, yes.
I brought 2 bottles, Chambertin 2012 and then a Lynch Bosch 95. I just brought that. I just feel like that's a nice little aftershock.
I actually brought 3 bottles of 89 Leroy, Clos de la Roche.
How much are these guys drinking?
These luscious 5 bottles of wine. Okay, so I've actually had a conversation with somebody.
Are they slurring by the end of the podcast?
I've had a conversation with somebody about LeBron's ability to put it back.
Oh, well, he's a large.
Guys,
he's a big guy.
Enormous.
Because
I remember there was somebody talking about how they thought they could outdrink LeBron. And this other person who knows LeBron said, are you crazy? Like, LeBron is the biggest person you've ever seen in your life. You could never outdrink LeBron. So, like, look, LeBron can't drive after a bottle of wine. It doesn't change his alcohol content, but he could probably drink more than most people, but 5 bottles of wine.
That's a lot.
It's not Andre the Giant.
Even for 2 large people, that's a lot. Yeah, have you read the stories about Andre the Giant? It's crazy.
Regardless,
that's a lot of wine.
That's a lot of wine.
You know, how red would your mouth be?
Yeah, right. You look like a little kid leaving
Got
lunch.
lipstick on.
I don't mind the JJ Reddick hire.
Oh, come on.
Because, like, we hire coaches for all sorts of weird reasons. And guys...
There are all sorts of bad hires, though.
Yeah, there are. Right, yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. I'm not endorsing it. It's as bad as most other hires. Could there be better hires? Probably. Would I have gone the Mark Daignault, Quinn Snyder, Nick Nurse route of hiring somebody from the G League? Probably. Who's the top G League coach right now? Do I really like the stuff they've run? Do I believe in what they do? Have they shown an ability to develop players? Do they call good plays? Have they made all their mistakes with timeouts? Good. Give me that guy. That's what I would do. That is the pathway I would go. But we hire former players all the time. So this isn't the first terrible hire.
And it rarely, if ever, goes well.
Correct. But the same thing seems like for every coach. How many good coaches are there? Seems like none.
But it feels like just because there are a lot of bad decisions made, that you're excusing a bad decision.
Sure, I absolutely am.
Like
100%.
You're just saying, well, a lot of people are morons.
What's one more? Yeah, that's how I feel. This isn't worse than their last hire. Well, okay.
It is, though.
Actually, Darvin Ham was kind of the top assistant.
Had some experience.
And was under Budenholzer. There was some belief that he was kind of the top assistant in the NBA. Now, that didn't work. Now, that's a major red flag, right? Darvin Ham was viewed as the top assistant in the NBA, had interviewed for a lot of head coaching jobs, and didn't get hired. Or did get hired and didn't work out. So I don't know. What makes a good coach? Would Lakers be better off with Kevin Young right now? Maybe. I don't know. He's at BYU.
That would have been a better hire, yeah.
But probably was like the name they would have looked at had they not hired JJ. But why did they hire JJ?
He's drinking 5 bottles of wine with LeBron.
Shotgunning bottles of wine with LeBron, apparently.
The sommelier.
I mean, that is the reason he got hired.
Yes.
That is 100%. That's where I will say the process was flawed, is that clearly there was a straight line through Napa Valley to JJ Reddick getting this job.
You know what this is? This is a silly buddies comedy. You know, because I'm convinced LeBron doesn't actually have friends, but he hit it off with JJ. We're doing a podcast and we're drinking wine and having a great time.
Yep.
And then he gets his buddy hired, and then he realizes, well, I don't know this psychopath very well, and turns out I don't really like him being my coach. And then he's usurping huddles and doing all the unhealthy things that LeBron has done over his career. So I honestly think it's fairly predictable, and it's both JJ and LeBron's fault. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. JJ Reddick get that job if LeBron isn't his podcasting drinking buddy?
Of course not.
It's, you know what it is? It's like when the Doors hired Jim Morrison's drinking buddy just to limit his damage.
This will fix it.
I'm going to hire LeBron's buddy just to limit how much damage he does to us internally.
So I don't think this
We have to draft Bronny for crying out loud.
But here's what I will say. JJ Reddick is no more likely to fail than anyone else they were to bring in.
Ooh, I don't know about that. I think they could have hired a good coach and traded LeBron, and it would have gone much better.
Well, they wouldn't have ever done that. So,
well, according to Woj, he's going to build his assistant staff with a bunch of experienced veterans
Listen,
to help
Christian,
him out.
you are significantly younger than me. Every time we see one of these crazy, stupid hires, that is exactly what everybody says.
did we hear that? I mean, we heard that with Will Hardy, right? Will Hardy was going to go hire the veteran NBA coach who's been there. In fact, the name that was thrown around is probably the next Cavaliers coach, James Borrego. And it just doesn't happen that often, actually.
Right.
You know? Does he go and hire Monty Williams to be an assistant?
You know, to that point, nor is it really true often. It's just a PR.
Yeah.
You know, we're hiring somebody with no experience. So we're going to make him hire somebody with experience.
And if you...
And then, don't we see it with, like vice presidential selections for candidates or whatever? Well, you got to make up where we're weak, right? We got to get a VP that's strong on this or that.
Yeah.
We're hiring a bozo off TV.
If you wanted that experienced guy, just hire that experienced guy. Amen. That's the thing, right? Like, if that's the guy you want, we like Jason Kidd being a mentor off the bench. Just hire Jason Kidd. So, yeah, I don't hate the hire. I don't love the hire. There's very few hires I've ever loved as a coach. He's going to fail because the Lakers are designed to fail.
Yeah, they're going to fail. That's
not necessarily indicative of whether or not JJ Reddick can coach.
Well, he can't. So we can solve that mystery now because his only coaching experience is like junior high kids or something.
Coaching up this bottle of red, this Pinot Noir.
It's got a lovely bouquet, a nice color.
Merlot guy.
Nobody's a Merlot guy.
Yeah, nobody's
anymore.
a Merlot guy. Yeah.
That movie Sideways sunk the Merlot market. I talked to a winemaker about it. It's like how much Merlot are you growing now compared to what you were growing pre that movie? He's like, we hardly grow any anymore.
Yeah. It's a fun movie.
It is a funny movie. All right, what's next?
Number 2, Oklahoma City and the Chicago Bulls put down a big trade yesterday.
By the way, the second there is drama between LeBron James and JJ Reddick, the headline is going to be Sideways, which is the name of the movie that we're talking about over a line. It's going to be Sideways. You're going to see it.
The sommelier on the outs.
I like this trade for Oklahoma City quite a bit. In fact, I don't mind this trade for both teams. Alex Caruso, I think, is a more valuable player in the playoffs. I think he's had injury issues because of the style of play. I'm not as guaranteed that this is just going to be a magical fit and it's going to work perfectly and he's going to play 75 games and push them over the top. But I do think he raises their ceiling where Josh Giddey, to the point we realized, was very hard to play in the playoffs.
Pretty hilarious, actually, that Josh Giddey and Zach LaVine are basically the same thing. Like, I mean, I guess I thought it was funny that Caruso was the headline. And, hey, Caruso's fine. I mean, he's a role player. He's the type of player you got to have if you're going to be a winning team. And I'm with you. He fills a need for them. I certainly agree with that. But Josh Giddey was the 4th pick. Joe Ingles,
top 10. I mean, he's like
Joe Ingles was on these airwaves multiple times telling you this guy was going to be a legend.
He might have been 7th, but yeah, regardless, he was a big investment.
He was supposed to be a guy for them. Mm-hmm. And he's young, and he doesn't have injury history. And they're trading him for Alex Caruso? And everybody's celebrating what a great deal it is for Oklahoma City is pretty hilarious, actually.
And look, if you don't remember, I think everyone remembers about Josh Giddey, there were pretty serious, not even allegations. A woman who apparently he had a relationship with tweeted out that she had a relationship with him when she was 17 years old. This was last year.
By the way, 6th overall.
Okay.
I actually think his low value has nothing to do with that.
It probably has more to do with the fact that
he stinks.
Oklahoma City's entire system with Shea is built around being 5 out. And the value of having Chet Holmgren is he's 5 out. He's a 5 who can play outside. You can have 5 guys on the perimeter. The problem is one of those guys was not actually a 5-out player, and that was Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey in the right system I actually think does a lot well. He's big. He's multi-positional. He's not totally awful defensively. He's a pretty good passer. He actually shot better last year than he ever had. Still at 33%. Not great, but it was improving. But he only played 17 minutes a game in the playoffs. Like, they pulled the plug on him really quickly in the postseason because they recognize he doesn't fit what they do.
Yeah, he lost games in the playoffs because you don't have to guard him. He's Andre Karolinko.
Yep.
You didn't have to guard him.
So for Chicago, you're getting a 21-year-old. He's very young. He came into the league very young. You're getting a 21-year-old who's averaged 13, 7, and 6. You don't get those guys for cheap. You don't. Those guys are hard to acquire unless there's other things going on, and there's part of Josh Giddey's context is both his playoff performance and his off-the-court issues that are going to follow him wherever he goes. He gets booed in every arena he goes into. It's going to be hard to negotiate with him. You have to sell your fan base on why you acquired him. All those things apply.
But he makes Chicago worse, which I think is their goal. So look for them to move off of DeRozan and Vooch. And
it's just so weird that we know there were probably better trade offers for Alex Caruso at the trade deadline because he's the type of guy a championship team can sell themselves on. He legitimately might be the best perimeter defender in the NBA. He is awesome.
And he only makes $10 million a year.
Right.
Yeah. But he only has 1 year left on his deal.
He does, but for a team that was close, they would have given up probably 2 first-round picks and matching salary for him, and then you have more freedom, more flexibility, more options. And Chicago sat on it. Why? Because Chicago's an idiot organization.
Horribly dumb.
Run by an idiot owner with a bad GM.
Has had many bad. Is that the curse of Jerry Krause? Ever since they pushed Krause out of that job,
Krause
they've been
curse.
just awful.
Remember the video of his wife crying at the Bulls Ring of Honor?
Oh, yeah.
Because they were booing Jerry Krause, and then they cut to his wife, and his
Horrible.
wife was in tears. She's like,
Just horrible.
85-year-old woman.
Michael Jordan truly turned that guy into a villain.
Yeah.
Even in that documentary.
Yep, he did.
I mean, just truly turned that guy into a villain. All right, what's next?
Number 3, the Utah Jazz are linked to Zach LaVine in trade rumors.
We talked about it quite a bit. Speaking of the Chicago Bulls, if you can take them for all they're worth, I would understand it. Zach LaVine just is not a needle mover as far as, like, if the Jazz are trying to get back to the playoffs, that's not what this trade would be. You do this trade to short another team on their future draft picks.
Short. Well put. It took me like 10 minutes to make that point in the last segment.
You're shorting them the same way you short stocks. You bet that this company's going to fail, the stock price is going to drop, and you make money off of that.
You shorted with Lowry Markkanen.
Yeah. You're shorting Cleveland, the Lakers, and the Minnesota Timberwolves starting in the year 2027, really.
Right.
You know, that's what they're doing. So you would do it with another team, and the odds are one of those 4 teams is going to be crappy at some point, and you will benefit from their draft picks.
So, I don't know. For people out there thinking, well, what's LaVine? What's this going to do? Are they making a move to the playoffs? Is this the answer? Is this the big game hunting? No, it's not.
No.
It'd be getting value where you wouldn't be giving any. Similar to John Collins. And maybe you build him up to flip him, or maybe you try and make him into a productive player. Either way, he hasn't helped Chicago win.
No.
So I don't know why he would help the Jazz win. Unless you totally think the Bulls have been mangling him in his career, which could be true,
And you're buying at an all-time low, which you would be, but there's a reason he's at an all-time low.
Yeah. But I don't think the Jazz, I don't know. I don't think a player that plays like him is all that conducive to what the Jazz are building. So I wonder if they think they could mold him into something else. Similar to Lowry, where he was being misused.
Yeah.
And maybe molded in something else. Something similar to John Collins. Similar to Colin Sexton. They've been actually pretty good at that.
Yeah, they have.
So maybe you find value there in some way. But they're certainly not going to give up anything. And brace yourself for Jordan Clarkson to probably get traded.
Yeah, I think there's a very realistic chance Jordan's not on the team next year.
No, he's got some value, and you can keep that asset up in the air. And he's not going to be the difference between, Jordan's a nice piece and a fine player, but he's not the difference. He's not a step difference.
He doesn't move the needle for the Jazz.
No.
I'm not writing off Jordan Clarkson's ability to move the needle for another team.
Depends on where they put him in what role.
And you know what? He said something interesting at the end of the year. He said he wants to win another 6 Man of the Year trophy. So he's clearly open to the idea that I don't need to be a starter and I'll come off the bench somewhere. That doesn't do a lot for the Jazz. When you're as far away as the Jazz are, you don't worry about your 6 man.
No. Well, no, that's just a signal to other teams that, hey, make a move for me. I'm not expecting to be your starting point guard. Yeah. All right, stay tuned. We'll have more Jake and Ben coming up next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben. Sean O'Connell is going to join us in the very next segment. Stay tuned for that. We're excited to talk to him. I want to remind you about Peach Doors and Windows. Amazing home transformations begin with Peach Doors and Windows, where 5-star reviews are the norm. Call them today for your free and-home estimate, 801-566-1255. Also want to remind you about Win Ticket Wednesday. Don't miss your chance to win big every week on the KSL Sports Zone. Next week on Win Ticket Wednesday, you can win a pair of tickets to go see Kevin James live at the Delta Center on June 29th. Listen to the KSL Sports Zone all day on Wednesday for your chance to win. Ben, I know you obviously get to know people over at the arena, going in and out, staff, that kind of thing. I worked over there for a long time. Well, still do. You know, the amount of stuff that they're doing at the arena is absolutely going through the roof. Throwing an entire hockey schedule in, and still going to keep a fully booked, or at least as much as they can, I'm sure, concert and event schedule. Those good folks over there have their work cut out for them.
They are not going to be the first people ever who have to switch between the hardwood of the Jazz court to the ice, but I can't imagine that undertaking. Have you watched the videos of how they melt the ice and have to they kind of sweep it off? Like, you have these big trucks that obviously will like push some of the ice off, but after there's somebody who has to go over there, and you know they paint the lines on hockey still? They still paint. Someone has to go out there at 3 a.m. after a Jazz game when there's going to be a hockey game the next night and get down on their knees and paint the fine lines. I can't believe we haven't found a better system for that. It's crazy.
Well, you know, that's a job, right?
It's a craftsman job.
Yeah, sure.
Karl Marx would be mad telling me to replace the artisan with a machine. I get it.
Oh, Carl will be grumpy.
But yeah, it's like a crazy amount of work you have to do. It's stupid. So I really have a ton of appreciation for the people who work there.
You should go over there and watch them get it ready for Monster Jam. If you want to talk about an undertaking.
How much you need? We need a...
Oh, hey, I see. Yeah, that was unintentional, Christian.
We need 40 tons of dirt.
Here and built into like ramps, and you got to do it by like 2 p.m.
And then you got to get rid of it because the Jazz are back
right
on Tuesday.
No small undertaking.
Have you ever tried to dig a hole for a tree? It takes 3 days. It takes forever. So yeah, thank goodness for problem solvers. I'm not one of them, but the world has them, and they're good at their jobs.
Sean O'Connell is going to join the show next. We're going to promote, of course, the Professional Fighters League making its debut, Ben, tonight at the Huntsman Center. Sean is very busy on fight day, and so we're super stoked he has a few minutes for us. So we'll talk to OC coming up next, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jacob Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. We want to remind you to nominate the youth sports volunteer you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contest and listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week, sponsored by Hercules Credit Union. Ben, tonight at the Huntsman Center, the Professional Fighters League is making its debut. Get your tickets now. Ticketmaster.com. Joining us now, of course, longtime sports radio host right here in the market.
Longtime friend.
Not to mention former professional fighter. No big deal. Actually, do you get the former, or are you just always a professional fighter? He is Sean, the real OC O'Connell. What's up, OC?
How are you, fellas?
We're doing terrific. It's good to hear your voice.
Good to be on with you. I listen all the time. I think that you're always a professional fighter in your own mind, but nobody has to call you that unless you're getting paid to beat people up. So you could call me former, whatever you want to.
Listen, I once introduced the great Mark Eaton as former NBA All-Star Mark Eaton, and he quietly pulled me aside after the segment was all done, and he said, "Hey, just so you know," and I'm not trying to be sensitive or anything, but you're always an all-star. You're never a former all-star. You're always an all-star. You know what I mean? Like, you're always a professional fighter.
Yeah, I made that same mistake with one of our fighters who was a two-time Olympic gold medalist. I said former Olympic gold medalist, and she was like, no, it's not former. That is, I have the gold medals. That stays with you forever. I was like, oh, okay, all right.
Totally fair, right?
Yeah.
Totally fair, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I would be the exact same way.
Sean, a lot of people, myself included, have seen the PFL on TV, may have watched your fights specifically. What is the difference between seeing it in person versus watching it on TV?
Well, when you're watching it on TV, it's hard to pick up the real, the sounds of what's happening inside of the cage, which for me is the impact of a kick on someone's body when a punch lands solidly on someone's jaw. I don't want to make it sound, I don't know, morbid might be the wrong word for it because it's not that extreme, but some people might be a little off-put by that. I think it's wonderful. I think it's great, and it's something that you only get when you're at fights in person. And there's just something about the energy, the atmosphere. It's palpable. Even when you go to like a low-level local fight, there's just a tension that we try to have cut through on broadcast, but I don't think it really does it. And that's something that live sports gives you in not just MMA, I think, but in every different sport. It's wonderful to see fights in person. And everyone who's a skeptic and everyone who's like, I'm not really a big fight fan, when you drag them out and you convince them to come, they leave more excited. Maybe not like a die-hard after that, but much more excited than they were when they were just thinking about coming to fights. So if you're even on the fence, show up. It's going to be a great night. You're going to have a great time. The stakes are incredibly high for all these fighters tonight. You know, it's either you keep the dream of $1 million championship in 2024 alive, or you don't, or you go home and you hit the reset button and you're back to the drawing board and hoping for an inclusion in the season next year.
OC, I want to throw a hot take your way, and I'm curious to your reaction, and frankly, you don't even have to react at all. But you know I'm certainly a novice fight fan when it comes to this world, but as I kind of look at the overall health of the sport, here's why I'm really rooting for Professional Fighters League to be successful, because I think this is a sport where there's kind of like the opportunities are controlled by one entity, in a sport where there's got to be thousands and thousands of talented fighters who are just as good as some others that just haven't gotten that opportunity. And I think it's a little different than football or basketball traditionally, where we have these ways to earn those opportunities. I don't think that path is always so clear in this world. And if ever there was a league or an entity that needed competition, I think it's the UFC. And I would guess that the talent level at tonight's event is going to be absolutely through the roof, because there's so many talented fighters out there that just haven't gotten that so limited opportunity for whatever reason.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, in football, basketball, baseball, it eventually becomes a meritocracy. Sure, there's politics involved on some level, but if you're good enough, it shines through, right? And we've got guys in the NFL, the NBA, that came from the middle of nowhere, that are from these small towns in Europe or these little hamlets in Africa or whatever, and they find their way. And MMA is doing a better job of creating those opportunities at the grassroots level, but there still is, especially, with the UFC, there still is this bias towards familiarity and these names that you've heard and, well, what's Conor McGregor doing? That's all I care about. And people forget, weirdly enough, that there was a time when nobody knew who Conor McGregor was, where he was the guy who came out of nowhere, where he was the undiscovered talent. And we've got some of those individuals on the card tonight. We've got people who are far more established. Clay Collard, who's a Utah boy, who's fighting in the main event. He's beaten 3 UFC legends already in the PFL. I mean, he beat Anthony Pettis. He beat Jeremy Stevens. He's always putting on these fight of the night performances, and people still act like because he's doing this outside of the UFC umbrella that it's a diminished accomplishment in some way, and it's just not true. I mean, he's proven that he is the caliber, and a lot of the guys on our roster are the caliber of a UFC fighter. Our format is a little bit different, and it does provide gradually, slowly progress towards real competition for a league that has had a monopoly on MMA for a long time. And look, the UFC does a lot of things really, really well. It's a great organization. It's incredibly profitable. You know, there's a lot of good things you can say about Dana White's company. But true sports format is not one of them. I mean, at this point, they're partially owned by, their partners with WWE. It's now an entertainment company with sport and true competition being the secondary goal to selling tickets and pay-per-views. That's not the case in the Professional Fighters League. We try to keep it a little bit closer to the sports purist thing, and it's going to be that way as long as I'm here.
Sean, I'm curious if you've thought, I'm sure you have, how different is your life, and I don't mean financially, but if you don't participate in PFL and certainly don't win at Madison Square Garden on New Year's Eve, like how much did that change your life to the point where how these guys are fighting for and kind of what it means for having made it versus, in some people's eyes, not having made it?
Well, for me personally, not only did I win the $1 million, which obviously can help anyone out on the financial front and the long-term stability front if you are smart with your money, but also, you know, winning that first season set me on the path of being the play-by-play guy, of having opportunities to call fights on ESPN. I mean, I had Randy Couture at my house for dinner last night.
Awesome.
That doesn't happen if I don't win, right? That doesn't happen if I don't participate in the first season and chase the dream, and thankfully everything fell my way, right? I mean, my life is significantly different because of this. And there are guys on the card tonight who have won the $1 million before. And here's a good example. Antonio Carlos Jr., Brazilian guy. They call him Shoeface. It's an ironic nickname because he's incredibly handsome, okay? He won PFL in 2022. And then in 2023, he spent the entire season participating in Big Brother Brazil, the reality television show, because his profile had been raised so high by becoming the champion in PFL. He got invited to be on Brazilian reality television, and he is like a megastar, huge endorsements and all this stuff because Big Brother is still a huge deal in Brazil on television. That probably doesn't happen if he doesn't win the 2022 season. So you can never really definitively map out how it's going to change someone's life, but it is going to change someone's life.
Sean O'Connell is with us, the real OC. OC, I want to know, and I've always wondered, how did you come up with your pre-fight press conference routine? Your poses, like you put in a lot of thought to that, and you know what? I saw you go viral for it again, like a week and a half ago.
You show up on my TikTok page every 3 days.
And so I want to know how you came up with that stuff. If you don't know, Google it. You can see the videos out there. But Sean came up with all these incredibly creative ways to, I don't know, what do you call that, OC? What's the pose, the picture, or whatever?
They call it the face-off.
The
it's
face-off,
when
yeah.
you and your opponent at the weigh-ins, do the thing where you go nose to nose, and some people talk a little bit of trash. Sometimes there's pushing and shoving. You guys know me. You know my personality. I think it's quite ridiculous that you're going to delude yourself into thinking that, I'm going to intimidate or scare this person who is, in my case, at least 205 pounds, who's dedicated their life to martial arts and is a professional combatant whose job is to climb into a locked cage and beat someone up. I'm going to scare this person at the face-off. Wrong. That's the dumbest thing to think. It's so stupid. So I was always just like kind of goofing around, having fun, right? And when I got to the UFC, my first opponent was a guy who had a very similar personality. He was actually a buddy of mine. We had gotten to know each other in some training situations, and when we both tried out for the Ultimate Fighter television series. And he was like, let's do something funny. And I was like, that's a great idea. So we did the little wedding toast one. We each had our Pedialyte to rehydrate ourselves, right? And we linked arms and took the drink together. And after that one went viral, as much as viral was a thing back then. And I was like, yeah, people are going to remember me for this. I'm going to do this. It's a small tactic for marketing. And that's why I had to retire, actually. I ran out of ideas, and I was like, I'm dry. The well is dry. I can't do anything else that's cool or funny. So I'm just going to be done fighting.
I don't talk about this a lot because nobody really cares all that much, but I have weird work dreams. I think most people have weird work dreams. I'm curious, do you ever have like nightmares that you're back fighting, or dreams that like you've got a fight coming up or you've won a fight? Like, what are your dreams like as a former fighter? Because mine are like, oh man, I randomly saw Will Hardy at Target or something in a dream. Fighting is a much different world.
It's so funny that you asked that question, because I have those on rare occasion, but I had one pretty recently where, you know how dreams go. There's not really a logical timeline, but where I found myself making the decision to fight against Tito Ortiz, who's just a ridiculous figure at this point, but fight fans know who he is. I was fighting Tito Ortiz in some like made up organization for like from the movie Warrior. It was going to be for like $10 million, which is why I couldn't refuse. But I showed up to the arena and I couldn't find my kit, my like shorts. In the dream I walked out to fight wearing a suit and tie, which is of course what I wear to work now. And I don't know what subliminally that means, but I climbed in there to fight Tito Ortiz wearing a suit, and the referee was just like, "Where's your gloves? What are you doing?" And I was like, "No, I'm here to fight.
I'm good.
I'm the fighter. I'm not the announcer today. I'm fighting. Don't worry." And I woke up after that. But that's what a timely question you asked me, because it was a strange dream to have.
Could you use your tie as a weapon or something like that? Like, I've got to play something to my advantage here.
Well, the fight never unfolded. I just would have thrown a shoe at him if it was strategic, you know?
I will admit, well, I'll say this. When OC first joined hands in the mornings, OC, you got the job and started the show on the same week you had a fight? Like as something like that, as you were starting the show. I mean, you were coming in like garbage bags and stuff, shedding weight. And yeah. I will admit that I didn't understand exactly how popular MMA fighting is in this market until I met you, and then, meeting Jan too. But I mean, when you and I first met, you were doing an MMA show on the station. I've gone to those events to support you guys, and they're always full and they're always loud and rowdy. And it just was something that I didn't realize. So why do you think it is so popular in this market, and where it fits on the sports landscape?
Well, people in this market need outlets, right? And MMA, for better or worse, people think they know what fights are about. Everyone's been in a fight when they were in third grade or high school or whatever. And it's just, you don't have to know a lot of the rules. It's not like basketball, and it's not like watching the NFL where there's a lot of stuff involved, strategy and play calling, and you probably needed to play it growing up to really understand it. I mean, you can be a rank novice when it comes to fighting and kind of look at it and be like, well, I think I know who's winning here. The guy getting punched is losing, and the guy who's doing the punching is winning. And I think the fact that there's a low barrier to entry is a reason why it's so popular here. And I think that, people in Utah love true, pure competition. They just love it in its purest form, and that's what MMA is. It's you boil down every other contest, every other sport, and it's, I'm trying to physically win. I'm trying to dominate you. It's this facsimile of war and of survival that we used to do when we were clubbing each other as cavemen. And MMA is kind of like as close to it as you can get now.
All right, OC, before we let you go, give us your, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this, like your TV guide take on tonight. Like what if you had to give us, a couple of minutes on what you're most looking forward to, make sure you're in your seat at this time, make sure you catch this fight. I mean, give us kind of this is how to consume tonight's event.
Well, the fights are early. First fight is at 3:00 on ESPN Plus, and then we don't go on main ESPN until 7:00 Mountain Time. The main event, I'm going to start there because it's a local boy. Clay Collard is a Utah guy. He lives in Idaho now, but he still trains in Utah. That's a Utah boy. Our state, if nothing else, is so good at supporting their own. Whenever you get someone who's climbed the ladder and who's on the national scene in any sport, they get love from the hometown crowd. Well, now you have a guy who's a Utah born and bred, who is fighting in a main event, and he's chasing $1 million championship. Also, he's got the most exciting fighting style legitimately on the planet. every single time Clay Collard fights, it is a barn burner and a must-watch. There's no other reason. If you don't want to watch anything else tonight, you have to tune in for the main event. But all of these people are chasing $1 million. Some of them know that they need a first-round finish in order to keep that dream alive. Some of them are going to be deciding if they can coast because they've already got some points and a spot in the standings, right? So there's all of these cool dynamics in play that make the fights more interesting. Watch from start to finish if you got the time. If not, tune in at 7 o'clock for the main card. Every person you watch on that main card is dreaming of a $1 million championship around Thanksgiving. And imagine that pressure. Put it in your own mind, what that feels like as you're walking into a competition, knowing that either it's going to happen for you, you can potentially keep the dream alive of making it happen for you, or it's over. And you got to wait until probably April of next year, maybe February of next year at the earliest, before you can chase the dream again.
Says the guy, Ben, that conquered that pressure. You bet. Lived it. Been there, done that, won that. Going to be on ESPN tonight. No big deal. The one and only, the great Sean O'Connell. OC, you are the best. Good luck with the whole event. We're cheering for you.
Love you, man. Good luck.
You're going to be there, right? I assume we'll see you guys up here at the Huntsman Center.
Jake's fighting.
I am. You didn't see me there?
Jake has hit a rough patch financially.
And
this is his only option.
That's it. I go with the flail style where I'm just going to I'm going to flail. Oh, scratching, maybe some biting. We'll see.
I want $1 million flailing, so don't knock it till you try it.
I saw that left hand devastate quite a few people. So
the flail is effective.
I'm not sure
though.
it was so flailing.
No, it is effective.
You took some punches though. Yeah.
That's why I retired at 35 instead of 40, so I could keep having conversations and remember your name.
Do not blame you. Thank you, Sean, very much. We appreciate it.
Brian, Jimmy, thanks very much for having me. Appreciate you.
Thanks, OC. All right, get your tickets at Ticketmaster.com. Fight's getting started shortly. You heard Sean. They're getting the first fight started at 3, but they don't hit the prime time till 7, so plenty of time to go consume it. And like I told OC, I'm really cheering for these alternates to the UFC because that's a sport that really needs it.
Yep, it does. It's a monopoly for the most part, and it has the issues that monopolies have. So I'm totally with you. I'm rooting for these, and I'm always rooting for Sean. Sean's just one of my favorite people.
Amazing.
Yep.
What a fight tournament for $1 million.
Very cool.
Oh. All right, stay tuned. We've got more coming up next. We're going to switch gears. We're going to talk a little college basketball.
Excited.
BYU momentum with Isaac Trotter for 24/7 Sports. So stay tuned. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us? No! Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jacob Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Big thanks to Sean O'Connell for joining us in the last segment. But Ben, let's jump out to the zone phone. Joining us now, he's a national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports. He's Isaac Trotter with us here on Jake and Ben. What's going on, Isaac? How are you?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's your job to follow college athletics, so I'm sure you always have a general working knowledge of a lot of teams, and they were good last year, so it makes sense. But this revelation and revolution that is going on at BYU to put them in somewhat of the national conversation for college basketball has to feel unexpected from a national perspective. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think that's crazy. I wouldn't say, though, I'm that stunned about it because I think that, as we've seen, college basketball has become an asset that a lot of people really want to invest in. And I think in this coaching carousel cycle, we've seen a ton of programs really want to invest in being good in basketball. And being good in basketball is important. And I think it's always been important at BYU. But I think especially in this coaching carousel after Mark Pope leaves for Kentucky, the boosters there and the program there has made this an even bigger emphasis of investing into this thing and being like, hey, we're going to go get Kevin Young. We're going to go invest in our NIL. We're going to go be positioned to go get really good talent because we want to be relevant. And so I think it's kind of cool to see this many different teams look at the college basketball ecosystem and be like, all right, we have to be good. And how can we do that? Like, what are the steps we need to take to do that? And it's going to be really, really fun to see some of these rosters that look good on paper, see how good they look in a couple months.
What do you think about how much we talk a lot around here about now investment into college basketball programs and how much it's going to take to get a winner and all that sort of thing. And BYU seemingly is really investing in their college basketball department or program in a lot of different ways. But if I ask you on kind of the broader sense on how much, NIL investment it takes to build a winner in college basketball now, what are you hearing?
Well, I mean, it kind of varies because I think you could look at a team like Kansas State in the Big 12. They have maybe the most expensive starting five in college basketball that we know of, right? Like we hear some of the numbers going around for Kansas State, and it's like, wow, that's, $5, $6, $7 million to put a roster together. And then I look and I go, I don't know if that's a top 5 team in the Big 12. Like, how much are you spending for that team? So I think it kind of varies because I don't think it's a surprise that some of the best teams in the sport, you don't hear anything about their NIL. Like, does anybody know what UConn's best players are getting paid? Like, I don't. Like, does anybody know what some of the best players at Duke are getting paid? I don't. Like, it's pretty quiet. It's like behind the scenes with some of those things. So I think sometimes in NIL-wise, there's a lot of people that put out these huge numbers, and we've seen $2 million float around for Coleman Hawkins to go to Kansas State or $2 million for Great Osaber to transfer from Utah State up to Washington. But I also think there's a lot of teams that maybe don't necessarily have as much money, but they're able to budget it in a really good way. And if you can make your program, where, hey, maybe we're not spending the absolute most, but we're actually have more bang for our buck a little bit by finding the right values in the portal, those teams are going to consistently put themselves in position to win. Because you can spend money and build a really good team, but I still think that like retention and building a program inside out certainly, is still a big piece of college basketball moving forward. Sometimes that retention is keeping transfers for multiple years. Sometimes that retention is getting a freshman in and growing them for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And that's not going away even in the kind of pay-for-play era.
Yeah, I guess it's one of the big questions I have for BYU and a lot of these teams going forward, which is BYU's obviously made some significant, I would imagine, financial investments in Yegor Gioman and Cannon Catchings coming in, and just thinking like, well, do freshmen win? I watched Arkansas probably spend $3 million on Anthony Black and Nick Smith Jr., and they won 22 games. They were fine in the SEC, but they weren't like an elite team. Are teams going to get burnt by investing in freshmen versus, the great Osabors of the world who might be able to actually step in and help you win quicker?
No, that's a great point. And I think a lot of people are questioning that right now because right now in the market, for most teams, paying a transfer is you're going to pay up for a transfer, and paying for the best freshman in college basketball has been, a little bit less, right? Like you're not the best freshman in college basketball is not going to get as much as the best transfer. But in situations like BYU's case, where Cannon Catchings becomes available late in the process, or Igor Demon, it becomes honestly one of the bigger free agents at that point. Like they both commanded serious offers that rivaled some of the top transfers in the sport were getting. So I think it's a really valid concern. Now, my pushback would be, I think that this freshman class coming in this year, even when you factor in, the internationals coming in, like it has a chance to be special. And so I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a pushback where it's like, hey, you just got to get old. You got to get old. And that's important. But I think there is going to be a pushback where some of these freshmen come in being more ready to go. And we'll see in the certain instance with Igor and especially with Cannon, like how that actually looks. But there are a lot of teams that have invested in freshmen this year instead of the portal because they view that some of the freshmen there are better than some of what the players in the portal were, and they could get them at a cheaper cost. And that's the real push-pull because you have to find a way to mix this roster in a really, really good way. And that's why I think, like, the retention of Dallin Hall and getting Richie Saunders back and getting Fustra Ori back, like, that's really interesting to me because we've seen so many first-year coaches, take over. I think there are 67 new coaches in this cycle, and a bunch of them have to basically start from scratch. Kevin Young's in a lot different situation with some of these returners that have played a lot of basketball and kind of know what their job description is coming back.
Who do you think had the best hire in this coaching cycle? And, I've heard multiple people say BYU, but, Coach Cal moved, Musselman. It was an interesting coaching cycle for sure. Who had the most savvy move?
Boy, there's a lot of different ways you could go there. Personally, I have a ton of respect for Mark Pope. I think Kentucky, maybe it's not the biggest name there, but I think he's going to do a really good job there. Honestly, I think they needed something different. I think if I had to gun to my head, my favorite one is probably Dusty May to Michigan. That was a Michigan program that was really reeling after the Juwan Howard incident. And just everything that had gone on off the court with him. He slapped an assistant coach last year. There was another fight with the strength and conditioning coach. Like, things were going on, with his health. It felt like everything was going on. And for them to be able to go get Dusty May, who had a bunch of offers, and maybe beat out Ohio State for him, like their arch rival, that would probably be number one. But this coaching carousel was probably the craziest one that I can remember. Like I said, 67 new coaches in this cycle. We only have 360-ish teams, right? So you're talking about, close to a sixth of the new coaches there, or sixth of the programs there got new coaches. And, all of it really, the big tumble really started with SMU getting rid of Rob Lanier. And that kind of kick-started everything with Muss going with Andy Enfield going to SMU, Muss going to USC, Calipari going to Arkansas, and then Mark Pope heading to Kentucky. So it's been a crazy, crazy carousel.
Did Great Osobor getting $2 million totally throw off the market? Did it set the market? Is that just going to be the going price now, or is it just a one-off?
No, I think it definitely set the market for a guy like Coleman Hawkins. He was one of the guys who exited the NBA draft at the stay or go decision, deadline there at the end of May. And he wouldn't admit to it, but like when that number came out, Coleman Hawkins is going, all right, well, that's the price for the best stretch big in the country. So I think it was an interesting dynamic too, just because when you factor in just like the position that gets played compared to like others, like people were paying way more for big men in this transfer cycle than they were for guards. Like, you could get a really, really good starting point guard for like $750,000 or $800,000. For bigs, it felt like you had to pay way, way more than that to get just maybe a starter. And it just feels like maybe that's just the start of a new era. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to just like time and place and the position that you played and the time you hit the portal and who had needs and who had the ability to get you and who was able to go back to their, NIL coffers and ask for even more money to be able to put together the best offer. So I think the smart teams are not going to pay $2 million to the best transfer in the portal because while that's Great Osobor is a really good player, Washington certainly needed him. I think the better programs are the ones that can spread that money out and build the best like 8-man rotation with $5, $6, $7 million, whatever that number is. And sometimes you just can't pay $2 million to one guy. But, I think at the end of the day too, with this extra TV money coming in, like maybe a $2 million deal looks a little bit small coming in for the future, just because you have so much NIL at your disposal, and we'll see what that cap space looks like. And I just really hope for the day that we can see all of these actual deals on like a website where we can actually find the real, how much they paid for this guy, because I think that will be really fascinating to me to see which schools are best, kind of utilizing their NIL, budget, so to speak.
You talked about this incoming freshman class, and obviously Cooper Flagg's the big name, but Ace Bailey's out there as well. What Duke, and is it Rutgers? Is that where Bailey's going?
Yes.
How important is it just for your brand to be able to still sign these guys as like the top freshmen coming in? And maybe they're both ready to help you win right away. I mean, they could be in that group. Versus, as you mentioned earlier, this push to get older. All these teams are trying to get older and get these transfers. Like, how much do you have to balance? Yes, you need the flashy new name who's only going to be there for 30 games, but you also need some of these older guys who actually might know how to help you win.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams are kind of, trying to figure that out right now too. Like, what's that blend of roster construction? And I think the teams are going to be the most successful. I will continue to go back to this. Like, if you're able to retain numerous guys, you hit the portal for a little bit of a splash, and maybe you hit a little bit of the freshmen too, and just a little mix of everything. That is really, I think, the best way to build your roster, because I don't agree with the fact that freshmen are going to have to be able to come in and a freshman-laden team can win it all. I just don't think that's the case anymore. And I think when you kind of look at UConn, like what the pattern was for them, like they were built on retention, and then they used the portal to get a guy like Cam Spencer for 1 year or Tristan Newton for 2 years to come in and fill the exact need they needed. Like, they needed a veteran shooter, so they get Cam Spencer. They needed, a playmaking point guard, so they go get Tristan Newton. And then they go onto the recruiting trail and go, hey, we need an absolute beast guard who can really, really play defense. And, okay, we're going to go get Steph Castle, and we're going to just push these pieces together with all of the retention that we've had. So I think it really comes down to like free agency, because how do we build the best roster possible? How do we build it with the least amount of positional overlap? And sometimes that's going to be a freshman, and sometimes it's going to be a transfer. And it really comes down to the resources that you have and the roster that you're building with the retention that you have. It really does kind of change. And, that's the thing. Like, you don't want to build around freshmen, but if you kind of look at where BYU was, like, late in the cycle, like, there wasn't a transfer out there that was better than Cannon Catchings that they could easily attain. So, like, yes, maybe you would prefer a transfer in certain instincts, or maybe some fans would want to transfer, but at the end of the day, Catchings was the most valuable, free agent on the board. So you kind of have to go for that. So that's where I feel like the nuance of building a title contender is going to be really fascinating moving forward, because there's a lot of different ways to win. You can win with no transfers like Purdue did. You can win with a ton of transfers like NC State randomly did, like going to the Final Four with 7 transfers in their rotation. And you can build, a national titles contender like UConn with a little bit of both.
Well, thank you very much, Isaac, for the wisdom and jumping on our show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Great stuff, Isaac. Thank you.
There you go. Isaac Trotter, national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports.
By the way, I believe I saw this morning that Jaeger Dioman got his official 24/7 Sports ranking, and he becomes the highest recruit in BYU history, outside of Sean Bradley.
Yeah, it's a new day for BYU basketball, apparently, which is pretty wild. Ben, if I would have told you 6 months ago that BYU was going to pivot to being an NBA-style college basketball program, being a conduit to the NBA for all these one-and-done players, I would have called you crazy.
Yeah. And we will see if it works. Again, we joked about this a year ago when you still had a Mark Pope here. And we're talking about what you're trying to do to win in the Big 12 or what you're supposed to do with Craig Smith up at Utah, how they're supposed to win. And just thinking, like, I don't know what you do to build a program. I don't know what you do to win if your program is not in a particularly great spot. And I don't know if I have any more clarity on that a year later, even though BYU made a good team, outperformed expectations in the Big 12, lost their coach, hired arguably a better replacement, and had the best recruiting class they've ever had. Like, I still don't know what of that actually translates to success. And as we talked about last week, I don't know if BYU basketball has a better team this year than they did last year, at least more success on the floor. They're more talented. I don't know if they're better next year than they were last year. They won 23 games.
Yeah, they were pretty good last year.
They were really darn good.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing. I don't know how many people do know what's going to work. You know who I think knows? Dan Hurley.
Yeah, he's probably has a pretty firm grasp.
But if you told me John Shire at Duke doesn't know what he's doing, I would say, yep.
Probably.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that. Like,
or Hubert Davis at North Carolina.
Yeah, right. Like, you've got 4, 5 five-star kids on your team. You've got Cooper Flagg coming in at Duke, the top recruit in the country. He's awesome. What if your other guys are better? What if you're, because the college basketball is all about now these upperclassmen that are playing older. Like, it's funny. Go and watch or go and look at a mock draft right now. It's obviously I'm up to my eyes in NBA draft stuff. There are not North Carolina and Duke players scattered all over the top of this draft like there usually are. It's just not what teams are doing anymore. And the funny thing about Duke and North Carolina, there is still this expectation to win. You can't just do what Cal did at Kentucky and get all these 5-star kids and not win games. Like, you can't do that at Duke. You can't do that at North Carolina. You can do it a little bit more at Kentucky, I guess. But even then, they were ready to run off Coach Calipari. So I don't know. You want to keep your job? You want to get recruits? You got to do everything. You got to do all the things all the time at once. I don't know how you do it. It's really tricky. Ick. Yeah. Ick.
Well, reap what you sow, I suppose.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, stay tuned. Wrap it up the week. Coming up next, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Two amigos on the airways, talking sports. They got a matrix and also loves his tie-dye. Ben's got style with his scarf. Oh my. basketball courts. They may be engaging their thoughts.
Jacob Ben, this segment brought to you by Peach Doors and Windows. Amazing home transformations begin with Peach Doors and Windows, where 5-star reviews are the norm. Call them today for your free in-home estimate, 801-566-1255, Peach Doors and Windows. Ben, earlier in the show, we explained I almost said our, but it's really more me, my fascination with Pat McAfee's armpit. And how there's got to be some TV execs over there who like, get a shirt on this guy. Our friend Jimmy alerted us to the, it was a skit where Peyton and Eli Manning are looking for a third member of the Manning cast, and this is McAfee auditioning. And Christian has found the cut.
Let's get some sleeves on you, big boy.
I don't think the job's for me. I have no idea what this is, but I don't think I'm the right guy.
See, it's a hard line for him.
Absolutely.
He's like, oh, you want to put sleeves on me? I'm not going to do it.
It's an identity. It's why Gene Simmons is afraid to wipe the makeup off. It
is. Never get famous wearing makeup.
Or not wearing sleeves.
The
funny thing is, you're right. McAfee could now leave the sleeves on.
He'd be just fine.
He would be just fine. It's not going to affect him. McAfee is the perfect person in that sense where the truth is Peyton Manning is too famous. And Eli Manning is probably too famous and probably goes to the Hall of Fame at some point. I don't know. Probably. But they just have too much power. They don't need anybody else. They like to do the Manning cast when it's convenient, but they don't need it. McAfee still kind of needs this.
Well, yeah, he probably didn't make that much money in the NFL.
Now he's made 9 figures now as a...
Well, way more than he did when he played, though.
Sure.
Because punters just punt for the league minimum. It's not like you get a big contract.
Right. So and we've heard some of the numbers that have been thrown around by some of his endorsements and stuff. So he's made crazy money. But he still kind of needs the job. So he's a little bit perfect in that sense because Peyton could do it very well because Peyton's just funny and charismatic and people really are drawn to him and like him. He just doesn't need it.
Well, Peyton and Eli have an image. Armpit was just a punter.
Yeah.
So, like, I would guess in the podcasting world, let's take somebody who's super high profile. Like George Clooney would probably be a stinky podcasting host because he has to protect his image at all times. You know, like radio podcasting, it's a very intimate medium. Like, you know, you kind of have to be real with your listeners if you're going to be successful, at least real to a certain extent. Like, Peyton Manning can't be real.
Correct. That's true.
He's probably some huge weirdo in his personal life.
Yeah.
He can't be real. He's Peyton Manning.
Yeah. I mean, to the point where Tom Brady did not like the roast.
Well, sure.
Tom Brady goes on a roast and thinks, oh, this will be fun, and then people get real with him, and he's like, oh, that was horrible. I don't want that to be my image. Because he has an image to keep up. You're right. McAfee doesn't have an image.
Armpit doesn't have any image. Yeah. He can say as many F words on ESPN as he possibly wants.
It's the fine line that's really hard to find. And when you do, you strike gold a la Charles Barkley. Barkley has found a great line to walk. Now, he also doesn't reveal everything.
Oh, I don't think he would be a good podcast host.
Okay.
Like, he's a good TV host. Like, he can spit out that content in that short form and where you're just talking about basketball. But most podcasts are deeper than that. Most radio shows are deeper than that, you know?
You're
where
right.
You have
there's
to
a
show
lot more.
A little bit more. I don't even know if Charles Barkley could do that. Like Michael Jordan would be the worst podcast host in history. They have too much of an image.
Yeah.
That you have to be guarded in what you say. I mean, even on that Manning cast, it's hilarious, but it's not
that deep.
It's not deep at all, in fact. And I'm even embarrassed to admit I like that broadcast, which I do.
It's good. They're funny. People are drawn to Peyton, and he and Eli are good, not foils for each other. They just play off each other well. So.
But I think the best podcast hosts have to go a little deeper than that, or the best radio hosts have to go a little deeper than that.
That's why you're the best.
Share a little bit more.
That's why we know everything about you.
But Armpit's a bozo, so he can go and be a great podcast host because bozo sells. But
he never set a bar.
But Peyton can't be a bozo.
No, because there's a bar that's
He's the great Peyton Manning.
Yeah. No, I think that's accurate. I think that's a good point.
I mean, Peyton doesn't surround himself with mulleted weirdos who I'm guessing make stupid jokes. I don't know. Again, I've never heard the show.
Yeah. If I could do it all again, I would set the bar much lower. Not that I think anyone has a high bar for me, but I can't let myself totally down.
That's the story of my life. People look at me and say, "God, I can't believe this guy can tell time."
And when you do, everyone's
They're
proud
like,
of
"Whoa,
Well done, Jake.
Good for you.
Showed up to work on time.
Barely, but hey.
Barely, we're here.
All right, stay tuned. Hanson,
Have a
Scotty
good
G are
weekend.
coming up next.
Thanks, Christian.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.